The autumn sun, no longer gentle but still generous with its golden hues, was dipping toward the horizon. Daria was driving her old clunker down a winding dirt road that cut through withered fields like a ribbon. The engine groaned, the suspension creaked, and it felt like the wheels might fall off at the next bump. She was used to these roads and to being alone behind the wheel. So when she saw some movement up ahead, right by the roadside, her heart skipped a beat. Something flashed in the headlights, white, like the side of a large animal. A deer? Daria squinted. Can't be a cow, they've all been in the barns for weeks. But the shape became clearer with every yard, and a chill ran down her spine. It was a man. Completely naked. He was energetically, even brazenly, waving one arm while using the other to cover himself. Daria slammed on the brakes, making the car rock like a boat in a storm. What the hell, she blurted out in confusion. Her heart was pounding in her throat. Fear whispered, keep driving, don't stop. But she couldn't just leave someone like that, alone in the middle of a field in the biting autumn wind. Compassion, an unshakable part of her nature, fought off the fear, keeping her foot off the gas. She could see him trembling violently. He's going to freeze. That thought drowned out all the rest. She rolled down the window. Get in, quickly. She didn't look directly at him, afraid to see more than she wanted. He really was completely naked. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him awkwardly jump into the car, covering himself as best he could. The heater was going full blast to counter the drafts from the door seals, and she heard his teeth chattering before he finally managed to croak out. Thanks for not just blowing past, he said hoarsely. I would have frozen to death. The car started moving again. Daria glanced nervously in the rearview mirror. How did you end up out here? She asked, glancing over her shoulder. How far is the nearest town? He replied instead. Daria frowned, confused. Did you fall from the moon or something? What town? We're in a village. She sounded more annoyed than curious. Close enough. I fell from the moon, he laughed, clearly pleased with himself. I just need to make it through today, then I'm heading back to the moon. Daria turned to him sharply, her face a mix of disbelief and suspicion. Her jaw dropped at his nerve and nonsense. Are you nuts or something? What moon? I'm serious, where were you going? And why are you naked? Well, can you help me out with some clothes? He asked, as if he hadn't heard her questions. I will when we get home, Daria muttered, eyes back on the road. But can you at least tell me where you were headed? You don't get it. I wasn't going anywhere. I have nowhere to go, he said softly, almost drowned out by the engine. Where on earth did you come from? She mumbled. The car rattled over potholes as they passed more and more crooked village houses. They were entering the village. Finally, she turned off the dirt road onto a narrow, grassy lane. The smell of wood smoke from chimneys mixed with damp leaves, creating that unmistakable village scent. Daria shut off the engine in front of a sturdy little house with carved window frames. Clumps of asters still bloomed near the gate. We're here, Daria said shortly as she got out of the car. Wow. This place is a total dump, he remarked, looking around at the old buildings and the yard. No cabs here? At least a motel? Daria just rolled her eyes. This is a village, not a city. The only cab here is your own 2 feet, she snapped. Come on, get in. Inside, the house smelled of dried herbs and old wood. It was still warm from the fading heat of the stove. The man, Alexander, as she would soon learn, followed her inside, looking around. His gaze lingered on the simple but tidy furnishings, the old china cabinet, the bright curtains. In the corner by the big Russian stove sat a neat stack of firewood. Where's the bathroom? And hot water? He asked. Daria pointed to a door at the far end of the room. Through there. And put this on. She handed him a bundle of her grandfather's faded clothes. He took them, sniffed them, made a theatrical grimace, and disappeared behind the door. While he changed, Daria lit the stove and set a big kettle on top. When he came back out, he was wearing old sweatpants and a shirt that clearly didn't fit, too big in every direction. He kept rolling up the pant legs as he walked. "This is some real country adventure," he said with a smirk. "I thought stuff like this only happened in movies." "So, you're a city boy, huh?" Daria said with a grin as she handed him a mug of hot tea. "Here, drink up. Warm yourself." He slowly lifted the mug, breathed in the aroma, took a sip, and his face lit up with delight. Then he smiled. "I'm Alexander." "What's your name?" the guy asked instead of answering. "Daria." "So, are you finally going to tell me why you were in the middle of a field with, well, you know?" Daria asked again. Alexander suddenly burst out laughing. "It's hard to explain. Things just kind of happened. Nothing serious." Daria narrowed her eyes in suspicion. It was clear he didn't want to talk, and she realized she probably wouldn't get anything more out of him. "All right. Anyway, once you've had something to eat and warmed up, I'll walk you to the highway. After that, you're on your own." She waved her hand, making it clear she wasn't planning to babysit him any longer. Alexander pulled the mug away from his lips, eyes wide with a mix of confusion and amusement. "To the highway? Are you serious? Look, I don't know anything around here. Can you just call me a cab to the city?" he asked with a smile, genuinely believing that would solve all his problems. Daria smirked again. "Sure. Anything you want, as long as you can pay for it." Alexander grinned even wider. "Thing is, I don't have any money. Can I borrow some?" Daria shot him a glare that could cut steel. Her face darkened. The jokes were over. "Do you even know how much a cab to the city costs? I couldn't afford that with my entire paycheck." Her voice was full of genuine frustration and exhaustion with his cluelessness. That's when Alexander stopped smiling. The carefree, cheerful look on his face vanished, replaced by real confusion and a flicker of fear. "Then how am I supposed to get to the city?" he asked quietly. Daria looked at him, then out the dark window. She pictured this city boy wandering alone down a road where even during the day cars rarely passed, getting lost in the woods, or worse, freezing to death. Her irritation slowly gave way to pity, and then understanding. "All right," she finally said. "It's too late now anyway. I'm not letting you go out there. You'll get lost for sure. You can spend the night here. In the morning, I'll drive you to Springfield. There are buses from there to the city. But no funny business," she added, nodding toward the heavy cast iron poker leaning against the wall. "I'm a light sleeper." Alexander caught her glance and waved her off with a crooked smile. "Come on. What do you think I am, some kind of maniac?" But Daria stayed alert. Something told her this guy needed watching. Outside, twilight had deepened. The autumn air had turned sharp and biting. Inside, it was still warm. Daria stood over the table, slicing vegetables for dinner, shaking her head. Deep down, she was still mad at herself for letting a total stranger stay the night. "Stop loafing around," she called to Alexander, who was bored, staring at old photos on the wall. "Go get some water from the well. The bucket's by the door. And don't spill it," she added with a smirk, doubting he'd manage. Alexander perked up and grabbed the bucket eagerly. "Right away, ma'am," he said confidently, heading for the door. "What a clown," Daria muttered, smiling despite herself and turning back to the stove. She heard the door creak open. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Daria frowned. The well was in the yard. Getting water took 1 minute. What's taking him so long? Did he fall asleep out there? She muttered. A couple more minutes passed before her patience snapped. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch. The wind hit her instantly, bringing the evening chill. Alexander was nowhere to be seen. Did he run off? The thought struck her with unexpected annoyance. "Alexander," she called out, her voice swallowed by the night. Nothing. She was about to go back inside when a muffled cry came from the direction of the well. Daria rushed toward it, picking up speed with each step. When she reached the well and looked in, she gasped. Unbelievable! That idiot fell in the well. Oh my God, how? Her voice was a mix of disbelief and panic. He was chest deep in icy water, clinging to the wall, trying to keep his balance. His lips were already turning blue, and he couldn't make a sound from the freezing cold. What the hell are you doing down there? Are you completely insane? Forgetting everything else, Daria jumped into action. She grabbed the bucket attached to a sturdy rope and lowered it. Grab on. Now, she shouted, using every ounce of strength she had. Soaked and shivering, Alexander barely managed to clutch the rope and bucket. Grunting with the effort, Daria began hauling him up, her arms trembling with strain. Finally, dripping wet and trembling, he climbed out. His lips were blue, his hair matted, and his whole body shook with violent shivers. You absolute idiot!" Daria hissed, but immediately grabbed his arm. "Come on, get inside, now." She practically dragged him, ignoring his weight and the water dripping off him. Inside, she quickly pulled off his wet clothes and rubbed him down with a dry towel until a bit of color finally returned to his skin. He was shaking like a leaf in the wind. "Fever," Daria muttered, her face turning serious and focused. She moved quickly and confidently. She brewed a strong herbal mix from the dried plants she always kept on hand: mint, linden, St. John's wort. She made him drink the hot, fragrant tea, applied warm, then cold, wet towels to his burning forehead. Her every movement was precise, like that of a folk healer. Daria sat next to him all night under the dim glow of a bedside lamp. She didn't sleep, just kept changing the compresses. Alexander, lying under the thick down blanket, exhausted and shivering, gradually calmed. His breathing grew steady, and soon he slipped into a deep sleep. At first, she kept cursing him for dropping into her life out of nowhere, for his clumsiness, for the mess he brought into her quiet routine. But watching his sleeping face, the slight part in his lips, his long youthful eyelashes, she suddenly saw how beautiful and vulnerable he looked in that moment of peace. The warmth she'd been giving him began to seep back into her own heart. Without even realizing it, Daria felt something tender awaken inside her. Then, giving in to a sudden, unexplainable impulse, she leaned in and gently, just barely touching, kissed his lips. Exhausted from the sleepless night, she didn't even notice how, sitting at the head of his bed, fully dressed, she drifted off to sleep, her head resting on his chest. Daria woke with a start, feeling someone's slow, deep breathing. Her eyes flew open, confused about where she was. Alexander stirred beneath her, trying to sit up. Startled, Daria jumped back, blushing to the roots of her hair. "Sorry," was all she managed to say as she adjusted her clothes. The events of the night came flooding back, the freezing well, his shaking, her kiss. She cast a quick, embarrassed glance at him. Her cheeks flared with a bright blush. Alexander, noticing her flustered state, tried to smile. "Good morning, Savior," he said hoarsely but with a refreshed voice. "I feel better than I've ever felt in my life." "Thank you." Trying to hide her embarrassment, Daria quickly stood and headed to the kitchen. Within minutes, the sounds of clinking dishes and sizzling oil drifted through the house. Alexander shrugged and stepped outside. He stretched, working out his stiff muscles, and took a deep breath of the fresh, bracing air. "Ah, this is the life," he said out loud, as if greeting the new day. Then Daria called him in. A few minutes later, they were sitting at a small, cozy table. Steam curled from a pot of herbal tea. There was a plate of boiled eggs, fresh bread, and a little glass bowl of homemade cherry jam. They hadn't had dinner the night before and were starving. Daria watched as Alexander spread thick butter and jam on his bread with gusto. "So, what exactly were you doing in my well?" she teased, but now her tone was light and good-natured. "And why didn't you just take the bucket when you decided to go diving? Seriously, how did that even happen?" Alexander laughed, though there was a nervous note in it. Yeah, that was something, he said with a wince, remembering the cold. I leaned in to get a better look. It was pitch dark down there. Leaned a little farther, and boom. Down I went. Thought I was a goner. It felt like I was falling into the abyss. His eyes widened as the memory washed over him again, but then relaxed. But turns out it was barely knee-deep. Honestly, it was kind of hilarious and pathetic all at once. She watched his face, how it lit up, how sincerely he laughed at himself. Something warm and gentle bloomed in her chest at the sight of his smile. You really scared me. But all right, enough jokes. Daria glanced at her old phone. First bus to Springfield leaves in an hour. Want a lift? What time is it? Alexander asked. 7 a.m., Daria replied. Can I borrow your phone? He asked, holding out his hand. Please, I need to make a call. Daria handed him her cell. Alexander stepped outside. Daria could hear bits of his voice, sometimes laughing, but couldn't make out any words. When he came back inside, his face was a strange mix of relief and tension. Daria looked at him, getting the sense that he was glad he'd reached someone but was also upset about something. Well, kind hostess, in an hour you'll finally be free of me, he said with a crooked smile. Daria gave him a questioning look, but he didn't elaborate. About an hour later, 3 large black SUVs appeared on the dirt road leading to the house. They looked wildly out of place in the quiet village landscape. The vehicles stopped right in front of Daria's sagging fence. A few muscular men in sharp suits stepped out, followed by 2 young men with wide grins. They wore expensive jackets and designer jeans, like they'd just left a party and were ready to keep it going. Daria stared out the window, speechless. The 2 guys looked just like Alexander, like mirror images. They glanced around at the little old house, then looked at Alexander, standing there in his faded sweatpants, and burst out laughing. Well, Alexander, what's with the outfit? One of the brothers shouted. His voice rang with mockery. Check out this shack. Did you seriously sleep here? Let me guess, with some village girl, the other laughed. When they spotted Daria stepping out of the house to see what was going on, both brothers grinned wide and let out a long whistle in unison. They eyed the girl, who was nervously tugging at her braid, with amused surprise. Well, Alexander, looks like you didn't waste your time, the first brother jeered, winking at her. Their laughter echoed through the countryside. Alexander, who had been silently watching their antics, stepped forward, slowly, but with purpose. His face was serious, without a trace of its usual mischief. Enough, he said in a low, commanding voice. Listen to me carefully. The brothers fell silent, glancing at each other in surprise. They hadn't expected that tone. There was something new in it, something they hadn't heard from him before. This house gave me shelter after you dumped me in the middle of a field. And this girl, Alexander turned to Daria, his eyes softening without losing their firmness, she's braver, kinder, and better than anyone I've ever met. She saved my life. So if I hear even one more word about her, or even see a look I don't like, you'll regret it. I promise you that. The brothers exchanged looks. The grins disappeared from their faces. They were clearly thrown off by Alexander's unexpected speech. Whoa, take it easy, Alexander, one of them said, raising his hands playfully in surrender. We get it. Alexander suddenly smiled, then burst out laughing, warmly this time, and walked up to his brothers. The 3 of them hugged at once. Daria, seeing there was no real threat, finally relaxed a little and gave a shy but genuine smile. Alexander walked over to her, took her hand, and turned back to the brothers. This is Daria, he said proudly. My rescuer. And these, he waved toward the twins, his voice now full of mischief again, are my troublemaking brothers, who thought I could use a little adventure. Daria nodded toward them. Come inside, then, she said, flustered. Tea's getting cold. The guys grinned and headed toward the porch. One of them looked around the house as he stepped inside and said, "Man, this place could use some work, huh, Alexander? If you move in, the mice will eat you alive." Daria, now feeling more confident, shot back with a grin. "If you keep teasing, I'll sick the mice and spiders on you for real." Everyone laughed. Then the second brother, still chuckling, clapped Alexander on the shoulder. "Well, Alexander," he said, his eyes glinting, "you won the bet." "Congrats." Daria's eyes widened. "A bet?" she asked. "What bet? What are you talking about?" Alexander laughed. "These fools dumped me naked in a field," he said, nodding at his brothers. "We bet I couldn't survive 24 hours with no money, no contacts, and a totally unfamiliar place. It's kind of a game we play. I won. Now it's my turn to come up with something for them." Suddenly Daria grabbed his hand. "Can I come up with it?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Alexander looked at her in surprise. "All right, go ahead," he said, glancing sideways at his brothers, who were already smirking in anticipation. "I'll let you take my turn." Daria turned to the brothers. Her smile widened, but her eyes turned sly. "The village road needs paving," she began, then quickly paused, realizing how big that ask was. Oops. Paving the road through the village turned out to be more than just a prank. It became a symbol of how even the silliest accidents can lead to something truly meaningful and lasting. Soon after cars started rolling through the village on the brand new asphalt, Alexander realized he didn't want to part ways with Daria. He had no intention of settling in the village permanently, but he also wasn't going to let her go. One morning, as the renovation of Daria's old countryside house was just getting started and the workers began tearing into the place, Alexander put her in his SUV and drove her to the city. As always, Daria had her hands full, but now her worries weren't about fixing a rusty car or patching a leaky roof. Now she was setting up their new, spacious apartment in town, where she and Alexander had started a life together. She was learning to navigate the big city, and he was learning to appreciate her rural wisdom and warmth. Their relationship, born in the most unexpected way, blossomed into a strong and happy life together, proving that sincerity and care can bridge even the most unlikely worlds. Let us know if you liked this story, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. A brand new story is coming tomorrow. Don't miss it.